What's up, Winnipeg voters? I'm Patty Wiens.
And I'm Sam Beiko. And welcome to Ballot Babes, your local politics podcast to help you get hyped for this October's civic election here in Winnipeg, Manitoba.
Maybe you've lived in this one great city your whole life, the city made of what's real. Maybe you just moved here from somewhere else and you're wondering how the actual do things get done around here?
Now, Patty and I have different origin stories. She's from Brazil, and I'm born and raised here. But we were both wondering the same thing. So we decided to create this local politics podcast that will perhaps leave you inspired
and sometimes infuriated and ready to take action when Winnipeg votes on October 28th. Sam, let's do some quick introductions for those of us who don't know us. Starting with you, if that's okay. Tell our listeners about your superhero origin story.
Great. I would love to, because I'm sure that there are a couple of people out there listening to this and wondering who gave these women a microphone and allowed them to talk about local politics. They don't seem qualified. And what you're going to learn as you listen to this podcast as we go on is that every single person eligible to vote and who lives in this city at a baseline is qualified to think about how their city is run and to care about it. So I was a big nerd growing up. I loved books. I loved movies. I was a super daydreamer. And that led me into a career where I write books. I write fantasy for teen readers that is traditionally published. And then now I work as a professional mentor for new writers of all ages. That's my day job. And I'm also a mom of a 5-year-old. I live in Charleswood, which is the Charleswood-Westwood Tuxedo Ward, which we're going to talk about a little later. So I live sort of, quote unquote, in the country part of Charleswood. And I became radicalized, is sometimes the way that we talk about these things, because of libraries, because I started to organize events at our libraries across the city. And when the budget came up in one cycle, library funding was cut exponentially, especially for our Millennium Library. Maybe you read a bit about that, about the closure of community connections, of the loss of hours across one of our biggest branches. And that was the first time that I decided to say something about it, and I got more involved and learned all about how to delegate at City Hall, which can be very nerve-wracking when you sign up and you want to stand in front of City Council and tell them how you think and feel. And you go there and you're really hopeful because you're there with other people who are also passionate about seeing the right thing happen. And a lot of the times your wishes are not granted because the decisions are governed by a handful of people. From there, I started to understand how the levers of power work, and as well as the people behind those levers. I also ride bikes, and I do now a lot of cycling advocacy at City Hall, and I come down and I sit in the gallery, and I'll sit there for 8 hours working on my computer, listening to the way that councillors speak to delegates, listening to the things that are important to delegates, and then seeing the final results and understanding what is important to our city council. How about you, Patty? Why don't you tell me what radicalized you?
Okay. Well, it's funny. To me, it was really simple. I just didn't want to pay for parking. I got a job downtown and I thought, I don't want to waste $300 of my paycheck every month after tax just to pay for parking. So I decided that I was going to start riding my bike. And all of a sudden I started thinking, wait, why do I not feel safe? Who gets to decide where bike lanes go? Who pays for bike lanes? Wait, who pays for roads? Am I paying for roads? Does roads come out of my driver's license? And all of these questions sort of made me start diving into how city politics work and who makes these decisions that affect my daily life. And I realized that it's just a handful of people who live down my street. I live in the ward of North Kildonan. What is my ward called? It's called North Kildonan. And my counselor, my city councilor, is Jeff Brawadi. So I started paying attention to how Jeff Brawadi votes at city council. What is important to him? And is he representing me the way that I would like him to represent me, because he works for me? Which actually reminds me, Sam, who is your city councilor?
My city councilor is someone that people suddenly learned a lot about this past week, Evan Duncan. And we're actually going to talk about why Evan Duncan has suddenly become so popular later in this episode.
You are so right. We are going to be talking about how our counselors become popular and how can we make them more popular? How can we really pay attention to things that they are doing and saying? And, we'd love to hear actually from you, our listener. How did you become interested in politics? Are you interested in politics? Do you care? And if not, we're going to make sure that you understand why you should. Sam, what is the goal of this podcast? What are we going to try to do here?
I think it's really important first to meet people where they are and to give everyone the benefit of the doubt. I feel that a lot of people don't engage with politics simply because they're not really aware of how it works around them. There is no broad information campaign being delivered to people through the school system or through any of our daily lives to understand these things. You only really start engaging with them when something starts to affect you personally. And then it opens your eyes to a whole beautiful new world of potential and dysfunction. So I think the 1-2 punch goal of this podcast is first to educate people on how local government works and why it matters to you as an individual and broadly to your community. And 2, to hold the people accountable who make these decisions. And those people are our city councilors and our mayor. And they speak to us in a very defined language, and that language is called policy. So you can really understand what is important to a counselor by looking at their track record of what they've voted against, what they've put their considerable power behind, and how they conduct themselves and speak to their constituents who work up the courage and take the time off work to actually speak to them. So we're hoping to fill that gap for a lot of our citizens and hoping that maybe it results in at least more people caring and showing that by coming out and voting on October 28th.
Great. We're going to make it really easy for you to help us make our city better. We're going to watch City Hall meetings for you. We're going to break them down for you and show you some highlights. And we will prepare you for what's coming up. So what decisions are going to be made in the next few meetings so that you can write your counselor or even speak at a meeting. It's not that hard. We can train you. We will get someone in here who's going to tell you exactly what to do.
I want you to think about local politics, listener. Like we're going to be commenting like ESPN. We're going to be just analyzing the way that a counselor smirked at someone in the live feed, as well as when a counselor who's silent the entire meeting finally talks, and if they were belligerent or not. And was that a valid way to address someone? Because you're allowed to have that opinion. I want to make it very clear that you are allowed to scrutinize these people. You voted for them. You gave them their job. And their job stands between you and their ability to work for you, like Patty said earlier, and to keep that job. So I don't want you to think that we're going to be coming in here, though, and performing character assassination. We're not here to tear anyone down. We're not here to look at anyone's personal lives and scrutinize or be catty. There is a lot of cattiness and cliquiness in city council as it is. We're not here to do that. Like I said, politicians have their one language, and that's policy. So we're going to question their motives before we question what they believe in. We're going to maintain our credibility by focusing on actions, on voting records, and public comments, but not personal attacks. We will ask why a counselor made a face or said something, like I said, and then we're going to examine that pattern of choices. Like I said, political sports analysis. And hopefully this will paint a clearer picture for you to understand what is important to that counselor who works for you. We're also going to try to make politics more accessible.
Yes. We always think that there is this intellectual barrier between us and the people that we're paying to represent us at City Hall. But the truth is, you watch 5 minutes of a City Hall meeting and you're going to instantly feel overqualified for the job. So we're going to make sure that you understand how accessible politics actually is. We want to show you that anyone can audit their government and that the levers of power are actually quite attainable and understandable. We often get caught up with national news, international news, especially right now, news with what's going on just to the south of us. And sometimes we lose perspective on the things that really affect us and how they are decided by someone who probably lives just down the street from us. And that those decisions actually impact our lives way more than federal elections or provincial elections. So our goal is exactly to talk about these things that impact us so much. Sam, what happened actually just last week that actually prompted us to get together and start this podcast?
Now, it's funny that you should mention American politics in that same breath, Patty. I'm sure that many of us are aware when we say down south and we refer to somewhere like, Minneapolis, the city that a lot of Winnipeggers grew up taking driving trips to with their families. And you see the level of protests that are occurring there, and that collective action and striking and mutual aid and community togetherness actually has worked to change lives for the better at a very galvanizing moment. And everyone's talking about it. Like you said, it's the first thing that people open up conversation with because we see ourselves as Winnipeggers almost in that city. Similar climate, similar urban landscape, very familiar. So that really important protected right of protesting and dissent against anyone who doesn't agree with you was actually called into question last week by my city councillor, Evan Duncan. He brought forward a proposed item for an executive policy committee meeting. And sidebar, we will get to explaining all of the different committees of City Council and who is on them. Executive Policy Committee come together. It's only a handful of councillors and the mayor, and they usually discuss items before they bring it to full council to be voted on. Councillor Duncan brought forward what was called a nuisance protest bylaw, which was attempting to combat small gatherings that could otherwise be deemed harmful to marginalized groups. On the surface, it sounded like it was pretty benign. It was putting a 100-meter radius around protests occurring near schools, hospitals, or places of worship. When you think about it, though, and it was mapped out for free by an advocate, when you think about all of the places that 100 meters would have protected in the city of Winnipeg and prevented protests from occurring in, it equaled 20% of the square footage of the city, which is bananas when you think about it. When you break it down, you could say then that protesting at a sidewalk in front of a hospital in solidarity with striking nurses is a nuisance. You could say that a round dance with Indigenous participants who are protesting for the environment is a nuisance. Anyone making noise, anyone disagreeing, anyone exercising their right to not accept the conditions that are being put upon them by a handful of people would be a nuisance. They would be fined $500 to $5,000 for just expressing their charter rights and their opinions in public. Yes, blocking traffic when there's a protest can be irritating. But what I learned from attending a recent protest around a young child being struck by a vehicle near a school and being horribly injured, we did disrupt traffic a little bit by holding up signs, and it ended up educating quite a few people on some key issues around our infrastructure. So anything like that would have been deemed a nuisance. You would have been arrested or fined. Big problem. And what was interesting is that a lot of Winnipeggers agreed that it was going to be a big problem. Since I joined advocacy a couple of years ago, I actually haven't really been a part of when everyone in the movement got together and said, this is bad. There was an unprecedented number of delegations at the Executive Policy Committee meeting.
How many?
I think there were about 131, which you only get 5 minutes to speak, but it did equal about 10 hours of people calmly, sometimes berating City Council with their thoughts. And also over 2,700 people wrote in on the record with comments about how this is bad. And I watched the meeting live from my office because I unfortunately couldn't be there. But a lot of my colleagues delegated. They delegated wonderfully. Clearly, lots of people that I've never met from the advocacy community. Was great. And in the end, a dissent worked. There was also a massive protest outside of City Hall. Huge crowd of people, like 500 people came and gathered. And it was really great. It was proof that you can go and you can use your voice. And in the end, the Executive Policy Committee moved that it would be taken as information and it would not be brought to be enshrined in law yet. It did really feel like a win at the moment, but with these things, it's not like Lord of the Rings, where good triumphs over evil and everyone gets to go home to the Shire. You have to kind of keep your eyes on these things because this is something that Evan Duncan fought really hard for. He said, I'm sorry, we need some more public consultation. But there are other bills like this coming up federally. Bill C9, that's something that you can look up maybe after this episode. And this seemed really important to him. And usually things that are important to councillors, they are going to bring them up again in another form at another time, which is why citizens have to be a little diligent.
Absolutely. You have to pay attention to these things. We have a lot of people who watch these agendas to watch for things. But if we didn't, how would we have known that this was coming up? That's why it's really important to pay attention to items that are on the agenda. And that's the goal of this podcast. We're going to break it down for you and make it really easy for you to follow along. There was something else, though, that happened in that meeting. And it almost felt like a little bait and switch. Here's something that you should spend all your time on while we do this other thing. And what happened was the road safety budget was cut by $2.5 million. So this is something that affects everybody, not just people on bikes, not just kids walking to school. Road safety keeps drivers safe as well. So we are going to play a little video so you can see a few things. We're not gonna spoil it too much, but our friend Tim Fennell created this video from a few different meetings put together. One of them was a public works information session town hall thing that happened last April. And the second one is a little clip from this week's public works meeting. So let's just watch here the video from Tim.
We believe that there is a transportation system that can exist in the future of Winnipeg where people of all ages and abilities are able to commute from their A to B on our transportation system without experiencing death or serious injury. We believe in Vision Zero. We think there is a long-term place for us in the city of Winnipeg where nobody is killed or severely injured.
So why is it not being considered for emergency implementation with 18 people have been killed by traffic violence in 24?
Again, this is the staff we have based on the funding that we have. We want to do it faster, but we need the funding, and you've seen the amount of funding that we've got.
Okay. Call the question on the item then. All in favor, aye. Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Item 16.
Oh, so what happened? What happened? What was that last clip?
That last clip was from the that same executive policy committee meeting that I mentioned, that the huge kerfluffle about the nuisance bylaw. Same meeting, exact same meeting. end of the day, they all moved to cut $2.5 million from the road safety budget. And, there was so much talk about this one issue, it really took the focus away, and it was very fast. And as you can see in that video, that was Councillor Janice Lukes. She is the head of the Public Works Committee, and I believe the deputy mayor. So she has a lot of pull. She's been in municipal politics for a long time. She is the councillor for Waverley West. For those of you who are listening and who live there, she is your councillor. She is the person that we are always talking to in urban activism or just advocacy, trying to talk about how we really need to get to a place where people can wait for the bus and walk down their sidewalk, those spaces that are supposed to be for human beings, and they cannot be killed by cars, by drivers. And so at that meeting, she was saying, this is if only we had more money, then of course we could get to Vision Zero, which is a term used for getting to a place where there are zero pedestrian fatalities, zero human road deaths, essentially. If only we had the money. And in the same breath, just last Tuesday, they're cutting that money. Another thing that we will include in the show notes is a link to the Winnipeg Transportation Master Plan, which is a wonderful document. You read it and you're like, yes, all of these things seem very obvious for making this a livable city where human beings can get around, where people can use active transportation and transit. And of course, we want to reduce emissions. But then in the same stroke, happening just a few days ago, policies moved forward to ignore platitudes. So it really seems like we're living in an episode of Black Mirror, where you're being, like you said, baited and switched, where you're really excited about this anti-protest bylaw and look at this groundswell of support, and then the rug's being pulled out from under you on something that's equally important. And then this was posted to social media, and the councillor herself had some comments about it.
Yeah, she did. What did she say?
She said, come to my Public Works town hall on March 4th. And we're going to talk about this, and we're going to, because this video is misleading about these things.
We're invited? We can go?
I know, but only if we get all of our chores done, and only if our stepmother, Mayor Gillingham, lets us go. Yes, we are everyone, not just Patty and me. Everyone listening to this, you can go and meet Janice and you can ask her in person, WTF, about this road safety budget. It's a way for you to engage, to ask questions, to meet these people and to have access to them rather than sending them a mass email or leaving them a voice message, which you should do, by the way. Whenever you want, they love it, especially Janice. That's why they have their phone numbers available on the City of Winnipeg website. You can leave them a message. You can let them know what's important to you. But this way, you get access to them and you get to meet them. And if you'll notice, if you're really bored and you want to listen to this EPC meeting, you can go back on the YouTube channel and you can watch it. And numerous times, Mayor Scott Gillingham says that this is the most democratic process that you can access your city councillors, because that's their job. It's to talk to you. It's to hear what's important to you.
Well, there is a little method to the madness. So we're going to be talking about how exactly you can attend these meetings. You don't have to register to go to these meetings, but if you register to speak, you are adding your voice. You're making them listen to you. If you are sending your comments via their website, that also helps. So what we're going to do is I'm going to put a link in the show notes on how you can find out what's going to be in the agenda. And we're going to leave the link for you to see what the agenda is going to be. You can decide if there's anything there that you want to speak to or simply want to go and hear all about it. We suspect that there will be issues of road safety. We suspect there might, we're waiting for a 30-kilometer neighborhood pilot project to come out sometime. I don't know when. Maybe it'll be now, maybe it will be later, but it's something to watch for. So that's what you're going to do. You're going to check the links here in the show notes, and we have a little bit more homework for you. This is our first episode, so we're going to keep things really, really light. Sam, do you want to tell our friends what the homework is going to be?
Yes, babes. This is what you're going to do. You're going to do a little bit of investigating for your own neighborhood, and you're going to learn who your city councilor is. If you already know who they are, amazing. I am going to be sending you some gold star stickers in the mail. But if you don't, what you can do is it's very simple. You can just Google city councilor and enter your neighborhood. If you live in Transcona, Elmwood, East Kildonan, anything within the city limits, you just type that into Google. That'll give you an understanding. You can also find it on the City of Winnipeg website. All of that information is listed there.
Yeah, if you go to the City of Winnipeg website, there's actually a spot, if you search on there who my counselor is, where you can put your postal code or your address, and it will tell you who your city councilor is. It will take you to their website, their phone number, everything. So once you do that, write it in the comments, because we are interested. We were interested to see who's listening, who's watching, who wants to get more involved. If you're not in Winnipeg, you can also learn a lot from this podcast, because a lot of these politics turn out to be very similar. So even if you do not live in Winnipeg, please go ahead, find out who your city councilor is, what ward you're in, how to find out when your committee meetings are. And next week, we're going to be talking a little bit more about what the Public Works Committee is, who is in it, what they get to govern, and just a little bit more of that.
Yeah, I think what is also going to be very interesting about this podcast, we started this out by explaining who we are and what makes us qualified to even be interested or talk about this. But maybe you're going to listen to this podcast and you're going to realize, wow, maybe I could be on city council, because we have this election coming up, and you can not only vote in the election, you could also run for councilor. Stranger things have happened. And again, the more you engage in this, the more you're going to open your eyes to, wow, I could actually do this job, because this is really important to me. And that's also an outcome that we would like to see, because what usually ends up happening is you're going to learn it's the same people for 20 plus years sitting in a seat, maybe not necessarily moving the needle in a way that's important to you or your family, especially if you have multi-generations of family who have lived in the city and kind of look around and go, things are not great. So you can be the change that actually happens at that level as well. And we're going to talk about how you could become a candidate, how you could build that groundswell of support. And most of all, we don't want you to feel isolated anymore. The reason that I kind of got into advocacy was that I felt really lonely being the only person who feels like they care in Charleswood. I really wanted to talk about these issues. And when I went to city council, I met so many incredible people, and I'm involved in so many wonderful communities now who are very active and who I learn so much from. Every time an issue comes up, I really feel involved and I feel supported. So just remember, yes, going and talking to city council, going to these meetings, it can be scary, but you might meet your new Ballot Babe bestie there.
Yes. That is not how we met, but
Very laterally.
But the truth is, you're so right. It's almost more important than what you say is finding your people, looking around and seeing these people who feel the same way you do, whether it's potholes, bike lanes, snow clearing, libraries. All of these things really affect you. If you say that you're not into politics, you haven't really thought about how much you need your community center, how much you need your library, or how you would like to just walk your kid to school sometimes without feeling like you're putting your life in the driver's hands. So we would love to hear from you. You can go to ballotbabes.com and leave us a voice memo with your question or comment or what you think we should address in this podcast. But make sure to tell us what ward you're from. And again, this is something you're going to figure out when you do your homework for this week. And remember, City Council works for you.
And this October, Winnipeg, tell your babe to vote.